The most requested question, surprisingly to me, is that everybody wants to know, in depth, in detail, your trip to North Korea in '95, Collision in Korea, because I think the Dark Side of the Ring came up not too long ago, and everybody's really fascinated with it. So, of the amount of questions I've got here, what did you know about North Korea and the crazy regime before you went?
Absolutely zero. I had no idea what we was going into. I had no idea what we was involved. I just knew that we had a big deal. At that given point in time, I was still in New Japan Dojo. I remember them coming in and say, "Hey, we got a big thing coming up. WCW, New Japan going over to North Korea. First time that they let Japanese and Americans in their country and X amount of years since the Olympics was done there. Was probably the last time that Japanese Americans was allowed to go there without being detained or whatever. So had no idea, but we knew that we was going. So we actually, New Japan actually has sent a couple of guys over who was actually Korean. I want to say they might have been North Koreans at that given point in time that was training, that had actually, and a couple of Japanese guys had the opportunity to go over with videotapes and films to produce to the country so they can watch wrestling again and kind of get back up on that's kind of smarten them up on about the wrestling in Japan and America coming over there. So they was able to go over and do a couple of pre-shows and things like that to kind of get the people interested. And because the last time they had wrestling was back in the day when one of the greats, Ricky Dozan, was North Korean, which was a famous, was one of the world's famous wrestlers ever, over in Japan and North Korea. So
when you first got to North Korea, when was the first inkling that you just weren't in Kansas anymore and everything was just it was obviously a very communist run and chaperones and stuff.
Before we left, when they told us that, hey, when we're flying on this flight, they have changed the flight. We're going to be flying on a North Korean airline flight Pacific. This flight will have cameras and microphones on this. They will be spying on us from the time we leave to the time we land. So we found this out way before we left. So right away, we was already on strict things on what not to say as far as negativity toward the country. I don't know how much they was smartened up on the American side because I was basically with the Japanese boys, in the dojo at that time. So we was smart enough to our rules and what we could and could not do. Specifically for me, it was Scorpio. You cannot talk to the women over there. You will not date none of the women. You will not say nothing to none of the women. That was for me specifically. You know what I'm saying? Or else you will be left over here, So the biggest thing was when we got on the airplane and we flew, all of that was like, wow, I'm looking around trying to see where they had the cameras at and the microphones. And, so I'm already trying to figure out where shit is. But when you land, and as soon as we land, the first thing they said before we got off the airplane was, give us your passports. That's when I went, oh shit, we might not leave, because then I had no idea what we was in store for,
Yeah.
So we couldn't see the airport. When we landed, the airport was covered with a camouflage tarp. You didn't even know he was even flying in. It's like he was flying over the mountain, and then we just swooped into the airport with, at that time, there seemed to be a couple of helicopters, Army helicopters and tanks that was covered up in camouflage when we landed. Flying in, you got to see the north side of Korea with all the tanks pointing toward the north, and then a big gully, a couple of miles wide, and then on the north side, the tanks and shit pointing toward the south, which I thought was pretty damn freaky. But yeah,
the demilitarized zone.
Yeah, we're definitely in a different world now.
Yeah. Well, you've already answered one question I was going to ask, was you were on the New Japan side, not the WCW side, because you had left the previous year. Did Eric Bischoff ever make any overtures did you even speak to Eric, and did he make overtures towards bringing you back for the upcoming cruiserweight division that he was trying to build at the time?
At that time, I don't think there was any business or anything that was discussed as far as coming back into WCW, for the cruiserweight or anything at that given point in time and stuff. It was just strictly more or less focusing on what was at hand, and a playlist of every place of where we had to go every single day, things we had to see, prior to working up to the 2 days for the show.
Yeah, when you're surrounded by 150 to 190,000 people, what is it a special feeling, or do you not even notice how many people are out there?
I would say normally you wouldn't really notice, but for me, after working in Tokyo Dome, Sumo Palace, places like that have sold out, 60,000, 80,000, I thought that was a lot of people, for me. I figured, hey, another 80, it's not going to be that bad. But I actually was the first time ever, probably ever in my whole wrestling career, I actually froze up and just kind of stopped on my interest to actually take in 199 some thousand people they had, 2 nights in a row, what I mean, which was amazing. That was probably my only time ever that I was probably stunned by that many people at one place.
Obviously, you've worked in Japan, or you've worked in Japan prior, as you just said, so you'll be used to unusual crowd responses where they're quite quiet and maybe polite applause or something like that. Did this audience make any noise, or did they have any clue what they were seeing at all?
I think with them going over, with New Japan going over and taking tapes of Ricky Dozan and some of the old wrestlers and some of the new wrestlers that was coming over there and smarting the people up, I believe that had a lot to help and do with the whole us going over there and getting some of the reception response that we got. A lot of it, they was kind of quiet, but a lot of it, they would clap and cheer. I thought what we got during our matches was genuine. It didn't seem like it was what we would have got if we was in America or in Japan as far as the crowd response noise-wise. But I still thought we got a very good response, overall.
Yeah, and obviously because you worked in front of 300,000 people, give or take, the payoff must have been amazing, or was it not?
If you was in that role or that situation as Ron Simmons or a Hawk or somebody that was on a main event, more or less level, if they had brought you in specifically for that show and that show only, then you probably made a pretty decent payday. Where me being over on the New Japan side, training young boy and all, I basically got my regular base training that I probably would have got. We probably got a bonus or something, but it's hard to recall.
No, you'd hope to get a 6-figure sum, really, wouldn't you, just to be on that show?
You would, you know what I'm saying? But just the opportunity to be over in North Korea alone is a lot of the pay in itself too as well. So.